Sometimes I wonder what metaphors and images Jesus would use if he were teaching today. 2,000 years ago, when Jesus roamed the countryside of Galilee and Judea, the people he encountered would not just understand his talk of vines and branches intellectually. It would be a vivid, daily focus of their minds. Even those who were not farmers could simply look out from whatever village or town they lived in and see the vineyards stretching up the hillsides. And to speak of vines bearing fruit wouldn't just be a curiosity to them, it would be a matter of life and death. What if the vines didn't bear any fruit this year? What if the rains didn't come and they withered and died? Or a blight came and the vines had to be trimmed back before the grapes had even appeared? This was even true of the fishermen and tax collectors who joined Jesus in that upper room in Jerusalem on the night before his death. The passage, the introduction I read said, is called the Upper Room Discourse, and in some cases it's called the Farewell Discourse, because these are some of the last words Jesus will speak to his friends. His friends who had walked past countless vineyards in the years since he'd invited them to follow him. We could think of this as Jesus' final lecture to his students. And that's what disciples are, students. And so I wonder, what metaphors, what images would a teacher of Jesus' skill and passion use to teach his disciples today? And it's a worthwhile question because, well, here we are. Jesus' disciples, his friends, branches of the true vine, bearing, we hope, good fruit. Good fruit in this world that is so different from the one of Jesus' time. I wonder if Jesus might say to us that he is the reservoir that never empties of water. The good, clean water that flows from him goes out into the city, into water mains, and then into pipes, and then to people's homes. And each of us is a tap or a faucet from which the water can flow or not. Is the tap turned on, Jesus might ask us? Are the pipes clear? Is there enough pressure in the system? And this would help us, like Jesus' friends, remember that it takes a whole community to keep the water system running. That it is much more complex than just turning on the faucet. In the same way, Jesus' friends would remember that a vineyard is a community work, that it's much more than just picking a ripe grape off the vine. And in our case, we see the work being done. We see the people at work, hard work, tearing up sidewalks, maybe as we walk through the neighborhood with our dog. A woman in the cab of a crane swings a 10-foot-long section of shiny new metal pipe down into the ground while her coworkers guide it into place. Well, most of us don't know the intricacies of that work they do. And in the same way, Peter the fisherman probably didn't know the delicate skill it took to care for vines the way a vineyard worker did. But Peter saw them at work day by day, and he knew enough to understand that their work made his life possible. And when the water doesn't flow, we know it immediately. Or when it comes out brown, or with a disturbing odor. We know that somewhere up the system, something has gone wrong. And Jesus might say to us, if the pipes aren't maintained, the water will not be fit for drinking. It will not quench your thirst. Those pipes need to be removed and replaced. good fruit, clean water. And of course, Jesus did compare himself to water on more than one occasion. So maybe my metaphor isn't so strange. And these metaphors, they are meant to elicit in us an understanding that apart from the source of all life, the one who the letter of John defines as, quite simply, love, we can't thrive. Ask the people in Jackson, Mississippi, how hard it was when the water pressure across the city dropped so low that people's faucets didn't work. Ask the people of Flint how the choices made upstream from them affected their health and well-being. That's what Jesus' metaphor is about. The vine and branches and fruit aren't about whether someone is going to heaven or being cast into hell. That's not what Jesus is saying. You may have grown up in a church where that was the point of this story, that a branch which doesn't do the right things or believe the right things gets cut off and thrown into the fire. But that's not what Jesus is saying to his friends. These ones who he knows will be sharing his life-giving message after he's gone. Instead, he is sharing an example they understand because they've seen it. The branches that get thrown into the fire aren't bad. They didn't make a choice to separate from the vine. It is simply a fact that branches fall off the vine, just like the branches that fall off the trees that you find in the forest when you go camping. Once the branches are no longer on the vine, they dry up, and the children go along through the vineyard and pick them up to use as firewood. Our faucet doesn't produce water. We get thirsty. We cannot get our clothes clean. This isn't judgment. It's the facts of the world. We need to be connected to the source, or we can't function properly. So what does it mean? What does it mean to abide in Jesus and, by extension, God, the source of life? The letter of John explains it to a later generation of Jesus' followers. Beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. This isn't about believing the right things or even behaving in the right way. The branch doesn't choose to connect to the vine. The pipe doesn't choose to connect to the pumping station and thence to the aqueduct. The grapes swell with life because nutrients reach them. The fruit is sweet. It feeds people. The juice can become wine. The faucet runs with clear, sweet water when we turn the tap because the water has flowed through this complex system. It can wash a baby's skin. It can quench our thirst in a hot Alabama summer day. What we are meant to do is remain attached. That's what abide means. It means to remain attached to what we are already attached to. Focus on the attachment. Focus on the relationship. Focus on the connection, not on proving yourself worthy of the connection. Because I'm sorry to say, but you, good people, don't get to decide it. God decides that. And God has already decided that. And spoiler alert, God has already decided you, yes, you are worthy. You might install a new faucet in your sink at home, but the water was already flowing, whether we want to accept it or not, whether we choose to share it or not. God's love is flowing through creation, and it will keep flowing because it is the reservoir that can't and will never run dry. Our choice and our purpose as Jesus' disciples is to do whatever we can to stay attached to that source and to help it flow more effectively out into the world. So how can we do that? Well, I often joke. And I say I joke, but you know that any real joke is not actually a joke. It's the truth. So I often jokingly tell the truth that preachers do not tell people something new. Preachers just remind people what they already knew. So let me remind you what you already know. Here's how you stay attached. Find communities that help support you in that. Communities like Grace Presbyterian, as from a minister who's a friend of your church can say, is a place where love and justice are practiced very well. Keep the connections strong. Read the stories of God's people, both in the scriptures and in the history of God's people, of the whole world. Remember the songs that have sustained us for thousands of years, from the ancient psalms to the anthems and hymns that we hear in worship. Pray daily. I don't mean you have to have a complicated prayer practice or do it perfectly. That's not the intent. But find time to connect your mind to God, to understand that there's more going on in life than just what is happening around you. Listen for God in meditation or on a walk through your neighborhood. Maybe this week you'll see a construction crew at work, and instead of noise and dust, you'll think, there's God's love in action. There's our community being built up so that we can take better care of each other. Because this love business, it takes work on our part, yes. But the hard part has already been done for us. God has done most of the work already. And our friend Jesus, he did the hard part. Our job is just to open the tap and let love flow.